Run a restaurant and you learn pretty quick. The sound of a crisp fry starts way before the first bite. As delivery and to-go keeps business booming,
Order for pickup.
McCain SureCrisp fries keep orders crispy.
Hey, delivery.
After the trip, the crispiness comes through. McCain SureCrisp fries. Go the distance. See how far our fries can take your business at surecrisp.com/delivery.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Extra Serving, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I'm Sam Okus, editor-in-chief of NRN, and I am joined once again by executive editor Alicia Kelso. Alicia, what's up?
What's up with you?
Alicia, I don't think I'm surprised you are sane and awake right now. You have had a week from, I don't want to say week from hell because you've had a whole lot of fun, but you have crisscrossed the country and another country in 1 week. Let's start with last week. You flying to Cancun to join the good folks at Raising Cane's. What was that all about?
Yeah, so they invited me to their conference, which was Restaurant Partners, which is something that we can get into real quickly a little later. And they renamed it Cancun, which I thought was super cute. There are about 3,000 folks down there from Raising Cane's. And, you know, the whole idea behind this Cancun conference, this event, was to basically thank the restaurant leaders in the system for all the work that they've done. This company is unquestionably a growth company. I think we've covered this pretty much at length because it's anomalous in this environment to be growing the way that it is. And a lot of the conference was focused on, hey, go relax, go drink, go to get a spa service, play some golf. There were some sessions, of course, about well-being, financial wellness, optimizing your mental energy, things like that, maximizing your benefits, just knowing what your potential here is at Raising Cane's. The one that I attended that fascinated me most was Making Millionaires, all about how that restaurant partner program is a really good opportunity if you play your cards right and put your head down and do the work that Raising Cane's has outlined for you to do. You should have $1 million net worth in the bank in 10 years because of the bonus structure and everything else that comes with it. It's a really complex path, but it is completely feasible. And Raising Cane's outlined how you do it. And of course, everybody poured into that. But I think the biggest takeaway here was just, Todd Graves, the founder of the company, getting up and basically saying, this is what we've done. He outlined the entire history, which I poured into because it's a really cool history. There was no deterring this guy from starting this company. He had a dream and he worked his tail off to make it come to fruition. And then his aspirations for the near future. I think by the end of 2029, they want to be a top 10 brand. They finished 2023, 28th. They finished 2023 at $3.75 billion, according to Technomic. They want to get to 10 billion. And they jumped over 20% year over year. And their path has been that aggressive for the past 5 years. It is kind of a bit of a category of one. There's a couple of emergings that are coming that we've talked about, you and I have talked about, Sam. But for the meantime, I think that this company is on a path, and I don't think there's anything that's going to stop it. I think it'll be interesting to see if it does become what Graves called, quote, one of those big boys at $10 billion, 1,600 units. They want to get to 8 million AUVs. Right now, I think they're around 6, things like that. It was really, really intriguing. And of course, everybody buys into this because they're all along for the ride. And there was a lot of energy. I mean, they were crowd surfing this guy. There was a Snoop Dogg concert, and they were crowd surfing Todd Graves. So to say there's buy-in from the team is, I think, a egregious understatement from what I perceived at this event. It was actually kind of fun. It was a lot of energy, and we have to cover a lot of the sort of the bad news, the challenges in this current environment. So it was kind of refreshing to see, some of this.
It's interesting. I remember this trip was originally planned for March of 2020, and you may have also gotten that invite. I remember getting that invite back then. They, invited media to participate in that. Of course, it got canceled. And I remember that being one of the first signifiers for me of, oh, wow, this pandemic thing is real. Like that trip got canceled. I wasn't going to go, but I remember just, there was sort of that hubbub around the trip, and then they canceled it. And so to think that even back in 2020, they were going to celebrate this team and what they've accomplished, how much more they have accomplished in 4.5 years since the original plan, because of how much further that company has gone, how much it just like blazed through the pandemic, and then it just continues to crush it. And so it's amazing to think how, he wants to become one of those big boys. I mean, he's not just going to be a big chain top 10. I mean, to accomplish, if they get to 8 million AUVs, if they get to 10 billion, that is rarefied air. And frankly, the only company that matches that kind of performance is Chick-fil-A, which is, I think, their main competitor. And I think you're right, Alicia, that yes, category of one for chicken fingers, chicken tenders. But for myself anyway, I think Raising Cane's and Chick-fil-A, it's like, I want chicken. Do I go here or do I go here? Now, you all know my allegiances. I tend to end up at Chick-fil-A. No disrespect to Raising Cane's. Quite frankly, Chick-fil-A is just a whole lot closer for me. But it's also like to think that these two companies and what they have accomplished with fried chicken is just so astounding to me. And I have no doubt they will accomplish that goal, by the way. I have no doubt they're going to make it to the top 10, because with 20% comps, what's stopping them, to be honest with you? This is another one of those chains that it just feels like you could put these in any community in America and they would do well.
Yeah. And the simplicity of it, I think, along with the restaurant partner ownership model, which is also, sort of what Chick-fil-A adheres to with owner operator model. And Todd touched on this a hell of a lot during his presentation. We're not going to hand the keys to some franchisees. We want skin in the game. That's the secret to our success. And I'm hearing that a lot more anecdotally. Red Robin is trying to incentivize like a, owner operator mentality. More companies are sort of trying to figure that piece out. But the thing about Raising Cane's that really intrigues me is they haven't added a new menu item in the 28 years that they've been in existence. Not one, and not even an LTO. And, that simplicity, I think we get carried away to the contrary of that in this chasing trends and fads and everything in between. And Todd Graves won't even add a dessert. He just wants to keep that focus, and that has really served them well operationally, and everything else that comes with that. From a training perspective, I would just think about that. You're focused on a very simplified menu. How can you not like that, from an employee proposition standpoint?
Sure. Totally. All right. So this is all a great segue into what we did together late last week, which is I joined you in Louisville, where you are based. I drove down and I
fed you some bourbon.
I had some bourbon. Yeah, I mean, you can't go to Louisville without some bourbon, of course. Poorly timed because we ended up in the middle of a hurricane rains and winds, but that's okay. Of course, our thoughts to the Southeast and all they're dealing with post-hurricane. Louisville got just a fraction of that. But I was there so that you and I could go join up with our friends at Texas Roadhouse. We have announced previously that Texas Roadhouse is our 2024 brand icon. And we're very excited to bestow this award onto Texas Roadhouse. Just a quick primer on what that means. We launched this award back in 2022, and we wanted to recognize a legacy chain that continues to stay relevant and fresh and innovative. Our first year, it was White Castle. Last year, that was Taco Bell. This year, very excited to present that award to Texas Roadhouse. And as part of it, we do these deep dives into the brands to get a sense of what this brand is all about. We will also be joined by CEO Jerry Morgan at Create, our event for emerging restaurateurs, which is just over 1 week away, folks. October 8th through 9th is our investment summit, which kicks off Create. And then October 9th through 11th is Create Official. And Jerry Morgan, CEO of Texas Roadhouse, is one of our speakers. He'll be there to accept the award with many of the Texas Roadhouse colleagues. And then he and I will chat on stage about a lot of what I learned, and I'm sure what you learned, Alicia, in Louisville last week. But there's a lot of overlap here from Raising Cane's to Texas Roadhouse and Chick-fil-A. And so I almost start to sense a trend. And if you ever want to know how to really succeed in the restaurant industry, these are some very, very good brands to study. But to start with, that owner-operator model, right? So Texas Roadhouse has their managing partners. And to be a store owner, you have to be a managing partner. It requires a $25,000 buy-in, which, by the way, extremely affordable and by all the grand scheme of things, I'd say, in franchising land. $25,000 buy-in, you've got some skin in the game, and then you are a managing partner in the system, and you share in those profits alongside Texas Roadhouse. They similarly have that owner-operator model. They are similarly very founder-led. Now, Kent Taylor, who founded the brand in 1993, passed away, sadly, in 2021. And as Alicia, you and I have been discussing, his presence is just everywhere. At their headquarters. He is clearly still very fresh in their minds. Mm-hmm. He had an outsized impact on that company. His personality was really larger than life. And all over that headquarters, you can tell what kind of impact he left on that company. So despite Kent having passed away, still very much a founder-led brand, I would say, in that he is kind of this North Star for Texas Roadhouse. We'll share a lot more at Create, of course, on stage with Jerry Morgan, and we'll share a lot more in the brand icon in November. Stay tuned for that. But Alicia, what were your general impressions of Texas Roadhouse?
All that. You talked the managing partner model. I think it all comes back to that. I mean, we talked to Jerry Morgan, the CEO. I had a chance to speak to Gina Tobin, the president. Both of them started at the company as managing partners. And I think that is significant. I think that exactly underscores what their whole objective is to ensure that skin in the game from the operators who are, boots on the ground in the restaurants. And I think it's served them really, really well. Like we talked about with Raising Cane's, it's another anomalous company. I think they have 11 years of traffic growth now. I mean, they're actually building bigger restaurants to handle the volume that comes into Texas Roadhouse. And we are all doing these stories on, building shrinking. And it's just madness how this has been such a juggernaut in the past, especially in the past couple of years where, then the rest of the industry has sort of struggled a little bit more. And it goes back again, we can talk about simplicity. They're not big on bells, whistles. They're not big on LTOs. They just sort of stay the course. And like you said earlier, Sam, the exact same conversation we had about Raising Cane's. And I think it's fascinating. And yeah. It was cool to get a firm pulse at the support center last week.
Yeah, lots to learn from these brands, as I mentioned. Certainly, if you're a founder out there, I think Kent Taylor, Todd Graves, the Cathy family at Chick-fil-A, some of these founders are really good studies of how to build something that lasts, how to have that outsized impact on your company, how to create sort of a North Star, how to have something that's sustainable and consistent. Lots of lessons from those chains. So highly recommend you go check that out. Again, Brand Icon will be coming at you here in a couple of months. But Alicia, very excited now to move into our extra serving of this week. We are once again joined by Senior Editor Joanna Fantozzi. Joanna, welcome to Extra Serving. Joanna, I can't hear you, so we got to figure out your audio. You're muted. That's a good explanation.
Oops, sorry about that. Hi.
I repeat, guys. Joanna, how are you? All right, Joanna, we want to dig in a little bit deeper to the delivery study that we published back in September. It's September 30th today. Tomorrow's October. We published earlier this month the third-party delivery study. We've partnered with our sister publication, Restaurant Business, along with In Touch Insight, a mystery shopping firm that conducted the study and collected the data. We teased it last week, but I think it was just too small of a taste. I think we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into this study and share a little bit more about the results and what they mean for the restaurant industry. So to tee this up, again, of course, third-party delivery, it's dominated the restaurant industry for, 6-7 years now. Certainly since 2020, it has become a mainstay for most restaurant companies. To bring back to what we were just talking about in Texas Roadhouse, they are sort of famously against third-party delivery, but they are one of the last holdouts. Olive Garden had been a holdout, but they've recently announced a partnership with Uber. So they are moving in that direction. Texas Roadhouse continues to hold out. And the reason it seems that Olive Garden and so many others have gone this direction is because, of course, the just mass acceptance and the mainstream adoption of the third-party delivery platforms among consumers. And of course, how easy they make everybody's lives in making food very easily accessible via delivery to your favorite restaurant chains. But the third-party delivery study measures things such as speed of service, order accuracy, fees, and it does so among the three largest third-party delivery platforms, DoorDash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats. So the data was pretty fascinating. The data broke down performance among chain restaurants, independent restaurants, and convenience stores. So I think there's a lot to learn among this data. So for where I want to start, and Alicia and Joanna both wrote great features on this study, and you can go check that out at nrn.com. But what I want to start by asking you guys is about the difference in performance among the third-party delivery companies. Joanna, let's start with you. What's your gut reaction, or what do you feel like was one of your main takeaways about the differences in these three companies?
I was surprised that there were as many differences as I saw. I actually thought that we were going to see that each of the third-party delivery companies was much closer in performance than they were. And that's really because simply because many operators that I talked to, and frankly, just from my own experience, a lot of delivery drivers work for more than one company. And so since they're contractors, they can do that. It's not like they're, they are working specifically for that company. They're basically like freelancers or contractors. They can work with whomever. And sort of like if you've ever gotten an Uber, oftentimes they'll switch out the plate or whatever, and it'll say Lyft now, and they'll also be then picking up somebody through Lyft. And so that being said, I was kind of surprised to see how much DoorDash really pulled ahead of its two competitors, Uber Eats and Grubhub. In talking to some folks in the industry, though, there definitely do seem to be logical explanations for this. It's just that DoorDash is kind of the clear winner, which is what I said in my story about this, simply because they have the most time, energy, resources, and finances to be doing that, to be putting into the quality of their product. And so, for example, Uber Eats is focusing on other things because honestly, even though Uber is a bigger company than DoorDash, Uber Eats is not, and it's just one part of the company because they're sharing with ride sharing. And Grubhub is much smaller, and as we've talked about in the past, they've had some financial issues, and they've kind of, and I know that their parent company has been looking to offload them and to sell them for a long time. That has not happened yet. And so it kind of makes sense that I guess that DoorDash would be the ultimate winner according to this study.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because the performance, which, again, highly recommend everybody listening, go to nrn.com to break down the data, because I would say that in a lot of categories, it wasn't so different. The performance wasn't so different, although some of the categories, there were some stark differences among the three. But I think a particularly interesting thing to consider here, and I'm glad In Touch Insight collected the data among chains, indies, and C-stores, because I would not have guessed that there would be much of a difference or thought that difference would matter. But there was kind of a stark difference among these three categories of business. Alicia, you wrote about this part of the study. Tell me about the differences among chain restaurants, indies, and C-stores. Why is it so significant?
I don't know. I know.
Anyway, moving on.
This was such a fascinating assignment for me because I was shocked. I don't know if I was just naive. You look at all of the bells and whistles, all of these well-capitalized chains have adopted to ramp up their delivery services in the past 4 years. I mean, it has been really intense. Once we realized, when sort of the dust settled after the pandemic, that delivery was indeed here to stay. Not just to stay, but sustain around that 15 to 25% of the mix for many, if not most, big chains. You see the investment shift. You see a lot of things that chains are doing in earnest to support this channel, adding cubbies or different entrances for delivery drivers. You see dedicated drive-through lanes for delivery drivers. You see even the investment in getting top of mind. It costs money to be on the first page of of DoorDash to be top of mind, because a lot of us are just habitual with delivery now, where I don't know what I want to eat. I'm going to go check out what's available on my delivery app. That costs money to be on the front page. This is money that chains have that independents don't have. And so when we look at this data that we were provided, to see independent restaurants outscore chain restaurants across the board, everything from accuracy to food temperature to overall guest satisfaction. I think there was a 7% difference, or 7 or 8% gap. I was stunned. But then when you start talking to some of the folks, some of the sources and stuff, okay, that makes sense. I talked to a driver. I intentionally ordered delivery just so I could pick his brain on this stuff. And he had been delivering for 4 years. And he's, oh yeah, there's more skin in the game for independents. They have more care. Maybe we're overcomplicating this. I tend to do that in my head. So maybe that's what this is. I think it's all just overcomplication. Independent restaurants have care in this in a way that perhaps chain workers don't. And that was the sort of the conclusion across the board as to why there was an overall satisfaction gap between indies and chains. That this extra mile idea that independents have, because it's, they're closer perhaps to it. They're closer to the brand. They're closer to the concept, probably closer to the owners, might be part of the ownership. Who knows? But that was the big takeaway that I saw. And there's another reason here that independent success was that drivers tend to favor those establishments because they have higher average order volumes than chains. So that tends to correspond with higher tips, which could also be a factor here.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, to your point, Alicia, I think indies, more so than chains, recognized that the delivery platforms were a lifeline for 2 or 3 years, right? Perhaps that's why they take more care. Although I would argue probably they're a lot more sensitive to what's taken off the top of every order, because that profit margin is a lot more real to an independent operator, perhaps, than some.
No, in fact, I talked to the owner of Soul Taco, and he wants to sort of it overcorrected in a way. He wants more. He wants to get a little bit further away from delivery. I think it's 25% of his sales now come from delivery. He wants to reduce that because of what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. So what do you think are some of the areas for improvement here? And I guess, of course, we're talking to the third-party delivery platforms, because you could say that, chain restaurants need to improve in how perhaps they incorporate these platforms, or perhaps they facilitate those orders, to Alicia's point about how they can be a part of the improvement, but also talking to the third-party platforms themselves in ways that they can improve. That there are 3 big players. There are more than 3 companies, of course, doing third-party delivery. They are here to stay, certainly, and perhaps we see some more consolidation, but hopefully there's also continued competition. So I imagine they want to see the improvement. Joanna, what do you think the need for improvement is here based on the data that you're seeing?
Well, I think that, just to clarify, the scores were relatively high across the board, across all these categories. But I do think that they could improve even more. And I guess that overall umbrella term I would use would be just customer experience / accuracy. So that's things that, categories that we're looking at were temperature, accurate temperature, whether it's supposed to be hot or cold, getting the correct order, and also it going to the correct address. And so these scores were relatively high across the board, like I said, but I feel like for some of the delivery companies, they're more like 89, 90%, and they should be much closer to 100. 89, 90% sounds high, but at the same time, that means that 1 in every 10 orders that you're delivering is either cold or going to the wrong address or what have you. And so I think that is probably something that third-party delivery companies can do better. Although at the same time, some of that is on the restaurant itself. And that is something that, Alicia, I feel like you were kind of pointing toward is that some of this customer service experience, is all of it on the third party delivery company, or is some of it on the restaurant itself? Because things like food temperature, it could be either. It could be that the delivery driver had too many items and had too many orders in his or her car, and so got to yours last. That's why it arrived cold. But at the same time, I've experienced something where I ordered sushi, and it came, like, this literally happened to me. I ordered sushi, and it also came with miso soup as a side. They put those together in the same bag. My sushi was hot. Was delivered hot because the soup was right next to it. That's not on necessarily the delivery driver, that's on the restaurant. And so obviously this study took a look at some of the customer experiences of third party delivery, but I do think it's worth a conversation. That I think that the restaurants and delivery services stand to work hand in hand more than they do perhaps now.
Yeah, sure. Alicia, what do you think about that? What do you think are some areas of improvement going forward?
Yeah, to Joanna's point, the scores are, I think about the improvements that have been made in the past 3 years. I mean, we've all been covering delivery since the pandemic and before. And, when I saw this data for the first time, I was actually kind of shocked that it was right around 90%, because 2 years ago, it would have been a completely different story. I think, again, it goes back to that point. We know it's here to stay. We know consumers want it. Perhaps surprisingly, because they're pulling back everywhere else, so they don't seem to mind that extra, $5 to $10, that comes with a delivery order. So I think that's where we are right now. And the one thing I think we still have a lot of work to do is on the sort of the fee structuring, the price structuring. Chains are just in a better spot to negotiate that. And that was obvious, again, when I talked to the Soul Taco purveyor, that independents don't have as much margin to give on this. So if you're looking at a concept like Soul Taco that now gets 25% of its mix from delivery, that's high. But he doesn't want that because of the pricing structures. And I think that's the big sort of thing that needs to continue to be worked out here. We're making progress on the packaging technology, the technology on when is this delivery order going to arrive. We're getting better at those things, and we're getting better at those things really quickly. The one thing I think that is still a major issue in this industry as it pertains to delivery, especially for independents and smaller chains, again, that don't have the ability to negotiate as well, is the pricing structure. Got to figure that out. We can't erode margins for these smaller concepts because 25% of their business wants to order delivery.
Yeah, I was surprised by the fees because my personal relationship with delivery has been to avoid where I can because of how much I feel like I'm charged on top of what I would normally pay if I had just picked it up. But when you dig into the data, it doesn't seem like the fees, the numbers don't seem as high as I would have imagined when you look at some of the average fees across these third-party platforms. And then when you look at the markups, I think to your point, Alicia, the markups are less than $2 across indies and chain restaurants for the products to compensate for the delivery costs. I'm just curious, were you guys also surprised by the fees as reported in this study? Did it seem normal? Do we feel like there's room to come down? Because at least as a consumer, the fees for me are always the barrier for ordering delivery. Joanna, what did you think about the fees?
Yeah, from my perspective, I was kind of surprised that they weren't quite as high as I thought they might be. I know personally when I'm ordering food, if I see, this says that it's free delivery, no delivery fees from this restaurant for today. Oh, I should order from them. Then I forget about the service fee, and that's another however much plus tax and tip and all that. And so I oftentimes find that it's not just $2.22, I think was one of them, was average delivery fees, but rather it is usually on top with everything added all together. I feel like sometimes it's like $8 to $10 in fees. And it's a lot. And so I was kind of surprised by that. And I also oftentimes find that restaurants will mark things up a lot more on these third-party delivery sites. And the only delivery company that I actually spoke to for this story that wanted to speak to me was DoorDash, probably because they did the best. But they had said that they actively discourage restaurants to change prices to change their menu prices. And they actively encourage them to offer discounts and things like that. So they're not passing those fees onto the customer. And then I talked to operators and franchisees for this story who were like, of course they're saying that, because then we're the ones that get the brunt of it. And so I don't think there's really an easy solution. But this is, again, kind of reading between the lines of the study, but I do think that perhaps the solution might be transparency, kind of being more transparent about your fees, and if you change your menu prices up front. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to me that they weren't quite as high as I thought they would be.
Alicia, any thoughts about fees or anything else?
Joanna's absolutely right. You've got your markup fee, and this was another surprise to me. So independents markups were dramatically lower than chain markups. So they're absorbing more, right? So independents charged an average of $1.25 more for their delivery, whereas chains charge $1.90. But it goes back to that negotiation, right? So then you get the service fees, then you get the delivery fees. It comes out as Joanna's point, about $8-10, right? So where that kind of reconciles, if you will, is independents. They're having about 15 to 30% of their margins sort of shaved off here because they're not charging as much for their markup, and they're not able to negotiate lower fees. So all of it, again, it goes back to that point. That's something we have to work on. I don't know if the answer is independents, bolstering their markups a little bit more. It seems like they've got room to do that. If chains are, whatever 90 minus 25 is, you don't pay me to do math. 65 cents. That's a lot of wiggle room when you're working with 3 to 5% margins. And so, I think yes, it surprised me, but I think overall we're still looking at up to 30% on fees here. And that's been a conversation that we've had since the pandemic, when these concepts were hurting to survive. And we still, I just think it's too high.
Yeah, but clearly consumers still like the convenience of delivery, so it will continue to be a part of our lives, no doubt. Very exciting. Alicia Kelso, Joanna Fantozzi, guys, thanks as always for joining me on Extra Serving.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Run a restaurant and you learn pretty quick. The sound of a crisp fry starts way before the first bite. As delivery and to-go keeps business booming,
Order for pickup.
McCain's SureCrisp fries keep orders crispy.
Hey, delivery.
After the trip, the crispiness comes through. McCain's SureCrisp fries. Go the distance. See how far our fries can take your business at surecrisp.com/delivery.